Thank you very much. Sorry. Okay. Thank you very much for this very warm welcome. I'm going to try to launch presentation. Thank you very much. It's a tall order when you're asked to present just after Bruce Schneier. And when I got invited and I saw the program, it was a bit of mixed feelings. How to stay relevant after this high-level presentation, very topical. But the good news is that you don't have to wear a tie. Someone else is not going to wear a tie, and you have permission not to wear a tie. So that's the good news about having to present in the same conference as Bruce Schneier. My research usually is about the social organization of hackers. But that's not what I'm going to present on today. Just like you, I attend many cybersecurity conferences. And every single conference or every single presentation ends on this call for more cooperation, more partnerships between the public and the private sector, blah, blah, blah. You know, yesterday, many of the presentations followed the same pattern. Collaborate more, we need to work together. Otherwise, you know, it's all going to become the end of the world. And my question always is, okay, well, it's nice to call for cooperation, but is there any way we can measure, we can try to assess what already exists? Can we try to understand the structure of existing cooperation? So that's what I'm going to try to do today, try to present to you the result of a little pet project I conducted last summer to try to get a bit further than just calling for more cooperation and partnerships between the public and the private sector. The problem with cybercrime, as we all know, is that it transcends borders. So this is a map of the Peace of Westphalia that created the modern nation-state system, that created the concept of sovereignty, according to which countries are responsible for everything that's happening within their borders and will not be attacked by foreign powers unless they get into a conflict or warlike situation. Of course, the map of the digital revolution is entirely different. There are no borders anymore. This is a map of the European internet. Flows of data, flows of information mean that the concept of sovereignty, if not dead, at least has to be adapted, is not as relevant as in the immediate past. So it's creating a lot of challenges and for many, many different parts and many different organizations, but in particular for law enforcement organizations. And this is a picture of a recent arrest, Blackshades, the Blackshades malware. But there are many, many of similar types of operations conducted by law enforcement. And if you can see on this picture, and that's from the FBI, I'm sorry I couldn't get one from the Europol press conference, but you can see that 19 countries cooperated to arrest more than 90 people. 300 search warrants. We heard yesterday more than 2,000 devices sized and analyzed and forensic analysis of all this stuff. So it means that you have to coordinate a lot of countries, a lot of law enforcement organizations together, and that's becoming quickly a nightmare. This man, I learned yesterday, resigned, so he's not the head of EC3 anymore, but his statement remains very relevant. Again, one of these calls, you know, the law enforcement won't be able to do it alone. So they need partnerships with the private sectors, academics, that's why we're here today, because of trying to build these networks. And I could have captured a lot of quotes from a lot of different people saying exactly the same thing. Of course, there are challenges to these partnerships. There are two main challenges, and maybe you could come during the question period and tell me, mention more challenges, but I see at the moment two major challenges to these partnerships and cooperation across countries, across sectors. The first one is that at the same time, and we heard about it yesterday from Bruce Schneier, at the same time we have to collaborate and we have to partner together. We operate in an environment of deep hostility, deep aggression. I think we're going to have this afternoon or this morning a panel on the attack on Belgacom. It's not an attack by China or by Iran. It's an attack by a NATO ally. Okay? So we are at the same time, you have to cooperate with friendly countries who are also attacking you at the same time. So it's creating this tension between the need for partnerships and the need to get at the intelligence and the information that you're looking for. The other challenge is that the hackers are very good at cooperating. They have this infrastructure, they have these underground forums. This is a screen capture from dark code. If you're from law enforcement, this is probably one of the most secret, hard to get into hacker forum for English-speaking hackers. I'm not talking about the Russian-speaking hackers. So they have all this infrastructure to organize cooperation. They have these reputation systems, and they can get into they can build up very effective teams very quickly. Now, this is the idea of cooperation for law enforcement. This is a map of the Department of Homeland Security after 9/11. It's all very bureaucratic, it's very heavy, it's very top-down. So cooperation, partnerships are very much harder to achieve for law enforcement organizations as they are for the hackers, the fraudsters, the online offenders. But, yes, it moves. So, and we have this also third problem, which is, I don't know if you've read the book by Evgeny Morozov, To Save Everything, Click Here. He talks about internet centrism. We believe that the internet is so different that we really have to imagine entirely new solutions to fix its problems. Well, I think that this is not so much the case. I think the internet is creating new problems, but this is evolution of problems. This is not a revolution. So there are many, many existing ways through which police organizations have cooperated in the past, and there are many ways through which offenders have adapted to their new environment, and this is just a new phase in this evolution. This is not a revolution. We shouldn't be so afraid. There are many solutions out there already that actually respond to this call for cooperation and partnership, and I'm going to talk about that. But before I do that, there are already existing a long history of cooperation among law enforcement agencies and countries and the private sector. There are three models, basically, of law enforcement cooperation at the international level. The first model is a privatized model. Very early in the 20th century, even late 19th century, when police forces didn't have this international network, private companies like the Burns Detective Agency in the US or the Pinkerton Agency had offices, I don't know if you can see, in Brussels, in the US, in Paris, in London. So the private sector already at that time, 1920, was doing international police cooperation. This is not a new thing. There is a second and a third model. The second one, of course, is the Europol, the Interpol model that was implemented in the 20th century. So for a long time, police organizations have cooperated to fight transnational crime. The third model I call the hegemonic model, not because I'm a conspirationist, but because countries that have a lot of power like the US are able to convince and sometimes force other countries to collaborate with them. And that's what happened starting in the 1970s in the drugs against war. Actually, by the way, the drugs won the war against the enemy. But the DEA and the FBI were very active in building this network of thousands of agents operating from embassies all across the world and trying to convince many countries to collaborate in this war against drugs. So we have many, many models of police cooperations in the history of law enforcement. Now the question is, because of this public-private dimension, are we witnessing an adaptation to a new model of police cooperation, which I call police-centric? And that's the starting research question of my presentation today. Is there any way we can map the collaboration and see an evolution of police cooperation toward something that's not entirely privatized, something that's not entirely bureaucratic, not hegemonic, but that is police-centric? So this is the research question, if you want, understanding the structure of international, and I switch to policing, because the police implies public institution. Policing involves the private sector, NGOs, and academia. The way we did the research, we mapped, and I'm sorry, it's not 55, it's down to 51 now because we had to get rid of 4 of them. We didn't have enough information on them. So we mapped 51, and so first big surprise for us when we tried to list all of the anti-cybercrime cooperation initiatives, we found 51 of them. Okay, so that's a lot. There is only one Interpol. There is only one Europol. There are 51 international policing cooperation initiatives to fight cybercrime. And we try to map all the members of this initiative, all the participants, and we found almost 650 of them. So that's a lot of people, a lot of organizations, a lot of countries. And we only mapped multilateral cooperations. So we didn't even try to map the bilateral initiatives or the operational networks leading to arrests without more permanent infrastructure supporting this type of interventions. The way we did it, we went to the gray literature, we went on the internet to try to retrieve all the PDF presentations, all the PowerPoint presentations from past conferences where people present their initiative. We went to media reports, and we tried to code all of this into a contact matrix to carry out a social network analysis. And I'm going to talk a bit more about that later on. We mapped the actors first. So as I said, we found about 650 actors, and we classified them in 4 categories. Public actors, countries, and we listed in this category all the police, law enforcement agencies cooperating to one or more of these initiatives. International organizations, including Europol, NATO, OECD, the World Bank, you name it. 100 plus NGOs, going from anti-child pornography NGOs to professional associations and industry associations, and businesses. And we have more than 300 companies in our database collaborating to these initiatives. So when I hear calls for getting the private sector more involved in these initiatives, where the good news is they're already very much involved in fighting cybercrime, and they participate, they're engaged to a fair extent. Actually, in our database, they represent almost 50% of all the actors playing an important role in this fight against cybercrime. So this is not marginal. This is the distribution of the initiatives according to their number of partners. And you can see that the vast majority of these initiatives have less than 50 partners. The average is 41, and the median is 21, meaning that most of these initiatives, at least half, have less than 20 members. So they are very limited in their membership. The reason why is that it's very regional focus and also very functional. So very functional initiatives concentrated on fighting fraud, fighting child pornography, fighting very specific types of crimes. The smallest initiative only grouped 5 members in the 5 Eyes countries, and the largest had 251 members, FIRST, which is the Forum of Incident Response and Security Teams, if I'm not mistaken. These 51 initiatives were led in their majority by the public sector, 63%. NGOs, big surprise for us, the NGOs were driving a third of these initiatives. So a third big class of actors playing an important role, not the private sector, not only the public sector, but also NGOs, non-governmental organizations, non-profit. And some of these initiatives have existed for a long time. FIRST was created in 1990, so 25 years ago. So this call for, again, partnership was heard a long time ago, 25 years ago to be precise. In terms of initiatives, it won't be a surprise to you that a vast majority are doing capacity building. 75% are, and of course, if you add up all the numbers, it goes to more than 100% because some of these initiatives have dual or triple mandates, but 75% almost do capacity building, half do intelligence sharing, and the operational aspect of this collaboration is only 31%. So that's why maybe we keep on hearing these calls, because people maybe don't consider that capacity building or intelligence sharing is enough, and we should be doing more at integrating partnering for operations. That's a guess. So the way we analyzed this data is we carried a social network analysis, a 2-mode social network analysis. I won't bore you with the methodology, but just you have to understand that this is a way, usually not network analysis is you trying to understand who's connected to whom among the same class of actors, initiatives, people. In this case, we are linking the micro actors to macro initiatives and organizations. So we are trying to understand the membership of actors to initiatives. So we are operating across two classes, two categories of subjects in our study. We are trying to understand the pattern of membership, why actors, what type of actors decide to become members of what types of initiatives, and the types of constraints some initiatives are creating for actors. The result is this. This is the map. This is the map of, so the red squares are the initiatives, and the dots are the actors. And the colors, they don't show up very well, but the colors are dark gray are countries, pink are companies, blue are NGOs, and light gray are international organizations. And as you can see, that's a lot of people, but you can see already from the visualization that some patterns emerge. You can see, for example, and the density is only 6.4%. So it means that of all the possible ties, only 6%, 6.5% of them get realized. So this is not a very densely connected network. This is not a very efficient network. There is still a lot of room for improvement. And you can see some patterns, and you can see some of the reasons why. First of all the countries mainly stay together. They stick together. So it means that they belong to initiatives, or they participate in initiatives that don't attract so many companies. Okay? Because to be a member of Interpol, to be a member of Europol, only countries can be members of these initiatives, not within Interpol and Europol, but below. Okay? If you're a company, there is no way you can sign a memorandum of understanding, but you cannot be a full standing member of EC3, for example. Okay? And that's a big problem. The companies also tend to be grouped together at the other end of this map. And they usually are grouped together across a number of thematic initiatives first, but also the anti-phishing working group we see here, this is a financial initiative to fight child pornography. So the private companies tend to be much more utilitarian in the way they choose to which initiatives they're going to participate in. And then you see another type of a pattern of membership where we have clusters of NGOs and professional associations being connected only through one initiative to the whole network. So it means that if it wasn't for these three initiatives, all this group of NGOs wouldn't be connected to the network. So if we remove these three initiatives, all these people here become disconnected. They have no other way of understanding, knowing what's happening, and participating in the fight against cybercrime. So this is one of the reasons why the density of this network is not as high as it should be. Of course, looking at this map doesn't tell you much, because it's like a dish of spaghetti. You know, there is really not much understanding to gain from that. So the best way is to try to measure the performance of individual actors and initiatives across three types of measurements or metrics. The first one is what we call degree centrality. We're trying to understand how many ties particular actors or particular initiatives are developing, and the most ties you have, the better connected you are to the network. So this is the table of the top 10 actors by numbers of ties, and the top 10 initiatives by number of members. And you can see, big surprise, you would expect the US, because of its size, because the fact that the Silicon Valley is based in the US, would be the #1 actor, the best connected actor. Not so. The #1 actor by number of connections is the UK. And I will explain in a minute why. Canada ranked, Italy second, Canada third, and that's not because I come from Canada. It's not biased. It's really scientific kind of ranking. France fourth. Belgium ninth, which is a good, I think it's a good performance. What's a bit more worrying is that China only ranks 41st and Russia 148th. And these are the two countries which, according to most, are at the origin of most problems on the internet in terms of cybercrime. So these two countries are a bit removed from the core of this network, and that's a bit of a problem if you want to build up collaborative ties with these two countries. The reason why the UK is #1, because the UK, because of its history, belongs to three types of groupings by countries. It's a member of the Five Eyes countries, so it gets to collaborate on all Five Eyes initiatives. It's also a former colonial power, so it's inserted into the Commonwealth initiatives, and it's also a member of the European Union. So the pattern of connection of the UK is unique because it's able to tap into three different networks: the Commonwealth countries, developing countries, the European Union, and the Five Eyes community. So that's only the reason why it shows up number one. But if you want to build leadership in this space, well, the UK would be a natural country to start from. In terms of initiatives, it's interesting that first is the number one initiative. So it's not an Interpol-led, it's not a Europol-led, it's a private sector initiative that has the most connections to the most partners in this network. And then after that, you have the ranking of all the other initiatives. And there is, of course, as you would expect, Impact, ITU-led initiative, Child Online Protection, Interpol. Because of all of their members, naturally, they rank first. Now, it's not because you have a lot of friends that all these friends are really going to make you a very powerful actor in this network. You could be connected to a lot of disconnected people, and you would have a lot of friends who are not able to reach out to more people. So we have a second indicator, which is the closeness centrality. Through this indicator, this measurement, we are trying to understand the indirect ties that you're able to leverage. So we are trying to measure the connectedness of your friends. So it's not only how many friends you have, but how many friends do your friends have. And it gives us an indication as to your capacity to reach the whole members of this network without too much effort. And this creates an entirely different picture. Because suddenly, the number one actor in this ranking becomes not a country, but a company. It becomes Microsoft. And we had a presentation from them yesterday, but if you want to know in this global anti-cybercrime network which actor has the best, most efficient capacity to reach every single one of these other 648 actors, this is Microsoft, by far. Then second comes Switzerland, and then smaller countries, Brazil, Azerbaijan. What, Azerbaijan? Yes, because they're connected to different parts of the network, and they're able to leverage different types of networks. And in that sense, they might not be a big country, they might not be a very developed country with a big IT economy, digital economy, but still they're able to connect, to leverage very, very complementary subsets of the network. And China and Russia still lagging behind. Not a big change in the ranking of initiatives. You see the European Cybercrime Center coming back up a little bit, and some other projects, such as the Virtual Global Task Force, which doesn't have many members, but is still able to leverage, again, very complementary clusters of this network. And finally, the third metric is the one of betweenness centrality. So it's not how many friends you have, it's not how influential your friends are, but it's how unique your pattern of connection is to be able to bridge parts of the network that wouldn't be able to communicate with each other otherwise. So how much of a broker, how many introductions, unique introductions, are you able to make? So that's what this betweenness centrality measures. And again, not a big surprise, we see that Microsoft comes first, but then the change in ranking produces as the second in this ranking an NGO, Save the Children. So this NGO, because of its membership, because of the countries and companies that belong to it, is able to connect together actors that wouldn't be able to have this linkage otherwise. Okay, so that's, to me, as a researcher, that's quite interesting, because you wouldn't expect from the beginning to say Save the Children is a key actor, key player in this network to fight cybercrime. Or maybe some of you would, but not me. We also see that Symantec has a nice showing. But we also see that there are, if there is Microsoft, where is Apple? What is Apple doing? it's a marketing choice. In the same space, companies make a choice to show up and to dedicate fair amount of resource to build up this network, and others make entirely different decisions. Okay? So it has policy implications. You know, how do you leverage, what actors do you leverage, but also how do you convince, because Microsoft, it's only what, now maybe 50, 60, 70% of the market. There are companies missing there, big companies. You know, where is Google? If you have Microsoft, you would expect Apple, you would expect Google to show up as well. Not so. Very far behind in the ranking. So we also have to understand that some companies have a security strategy to belong to this network, others just don't seem to care as much. And in terms of the ranking of initiatives, we see that actually the first two initiatives are two private-led initiatives. Anti-phishing working group and FIRST. And again, that has implications. Yes, Interpol and ITU-led initiatives have more members, but they're not necessarily able to reach out to such a diversity of members and actors. And we should be thinking about that as well. How do we do that? So in conclusion, because I think my time is up, there are four main conclusions, I think, and maybe, you know, I welcome your comments and during the discussion. I don't know if we'll have time for questions, but I welcome your comments during the break. I'm going to stick around for the whole day. But I think so the first observation, there is no core and no periphery to this network. It's a very egalitarian network. Companies such as Microsoft play a very central role as well. So it's not a top-down. It's not easy to identify how central, a small core of central actors and a huge group of peripheral actors. It's much more fuzzy than that. And actually, if you paid attention to the numbers, and they were all, I'm sorry, it was in percentage, the difference between some of the actors were not so big. So it's a very concentrated network, which is not very dense. So that's a problem. It's a polycentric network for sure. You have different centers of governance in this network. It's organized across jurisdictional lines. So you can see, and I didn't have time to present that, but you see that across regions of the world, Latin America, Asia, Eastern Europe, there are different patterns of connections, different types of regional level initiatives that are fragmenting the network. Also very functional. You see, even the private sector organizes itself across its particular interests, whether it's to fight fraud or to fight child pornography. So functions and borders and regions of the world still matter a lot. It's a disconnected network. We still have a lot of trouble connecting private sector and law enforcement organizations. It's there, but it's not as dense, it's not as well connected as it could be. And finally, it's not yet nodal in the sense that it's not a very efficient network. There is a proliferation of initiatives. I'm not saying that there should only be 3 or 4 initiatives, but 51 clearly doing pretty much the same thing, which is capacity building, which is intelligence sharing, is probably 20 or 30 too many. Okay, if you want to make this network really effective, or maybe they should be sharing, they should be coordinating a bit more than they're doing at the moment. There seems to be a lot of overlap, a lot of repetition from one to the other from the documentation that we read. So what next? As I said, this is only the beginning of a research, depending on the type of feedback I get. You know, it could be interesting to dig more into the data. So it's only quantitative analysis from very high level. It would be interesting to interview some of the companies and some of the countries, the police officers responsible for these partnerships in the countries that rank first and last, to understand why, you know, what motivates you to put so much effort, to invest so much time and so many resources into this type of networks, and why don't you do more to try to connect, to try to build up these partnerships. So qualitative interviews to understand the opportunities and the constraints and the challenges. We didn't map bilateral cooperation, and we didn't map multi-jurisdictional operations. And I've got a feeling that would provide a very, very different map. Multi-jurisdictional arrests probably would put up the US much higher in the ranking because of all the FBI and the Secret Service-led operations. So we also have to understand a bit better how certain countries seem to operate on an entirely different level. And on this note, and leaving you my email address if you're interested, I would like to thank you for the quality of your attention, if you're being courageous enough to wake up and come to listen to me at 9 a.m. in the morning. Thank you very much for the invitation.
Thank you.